When is it more prudent to buy a new car than to buy a used one? I mean, conventional wisdom says that buying a new car is really a luxury. It's one in which if you can afford it, it's nice to have a new car with that new car smell and the ultra warranty, but it doesn't represent the best bang for buck or value because most of that money is gone through the depreciation in the first year. Not only that, they say as soon as you hit that first intersection after you leave the car lot, you've already lost as much as 35% of the value of that brand new car. But I'm here to basically say times have changed, things have changed, the conditions have changed. And I've been preaching to a lot of you for a long time that there's a couple of cars you want to target specifically if you want to save money. Now, in some cases, there's certain models and certain types of vehicles that are going to be a huge savings, and you're going to be financially miles ahead by buying new vehicles. But there are some cases where buying older used ones make more sense. We're going to break that down because you can't paint it all with the same brush, and ideally, we're here to just save a few bucks. I'm just so tired of what the dealer markups, the scams, the rip-off artists out there. Just look at Facebook Marketplace. It's loaded and littered with trash. The used car market has a lot of junk on it. Therefore, a lot of people just like to default to new. But again, as I've already said, when we think about conventional wisdom says buying a new car is a waste of money. But let's get into that because it's not just a peace of mind and having that warranty. There are some financial reasons why, in fact, you might want to buy a new car. So let's take this from the top and consider the fact that prior to 2019, things were different. Since then, and the shortages, the chip shortages, inventory shortages, it changed the entire landscape of car buying. Now, what has happened today in 2025, we've seen this evolution of the car market. There's cars that tend to hold value extremely well. They provide that value for a lot of buyers. Smaller, reliable car brands, Toyotas, Hondas, subcompact SUVs, smaller cars, manual gearboxes, none of that CVT trash, but generally reliable import Japanese cars. Hondas, Toyotas, even Mazdas seem to represent good value and bang for buck. Also, I might have to add, hybrid, even though there's a lot of people, it's still a little bit, some love, some not as much. The fact remains is hybrid vehicles are very hard to find on the secondary market. That's right. In other words, you're probably going to pay more for any one of those hybrids, whether it's plug-in or standard hybrid vehicles, subcompact SUVs, small compact cars like Corollas, Mazda 3s, CRVs, RAV4s, even the Toyota 4Runner? That's slightly larger, but virtually anything that has a reliability reputation packed behind it are generally going to hold better value. I mean, we heard what was going on during the peak back in 22, 23. There was cases where people paid more for a 2-year-old Toyota Tacoma that actually had some miles on it than you could get for brand new. The problem was you had to wait for that new one, and people were waiting for 6 months, a year, and some of the hybrids were up to 2 to 3 years to get a hybrid vehicle. It's absolute lunacy. Now, things have changed a little bit, but what hasn't changed is the popularity of reliable brands. And so what that means is people put value in hybrids and these smaller cars from reputable manufacturers, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for the used vehicles. There's lots of cases where you go out there, and we experienced the same thing prior to buying our brand new Toyota Camry, was shopping around, finding that most of the cars that were 2, 3, 4 years old Camrys had miles, significant miles, service issues, collision damage, some kind of history, and yet the sellers wanted close to what they wanted for brand new versions. Now, it doesn't take long to peruse the classifieds, and you're going to find the same thing. A 2 or 3 or 4-year-old vehicle like a Camry or Corolla or a Honda Civic are likely going to command top dollar. They're going to be up around that 80 to 90% of the brand new vehicle price. Whereas certain vehicles don't make sense to buy brand new because they see such a massive depreciation. Some of those vehicles represent full-size pickup trucks, unreliable brands, Buicks, Chevys, Fords tend to depreciate a little bit faster, except certain niche models. I mean, we talk about The Ford Broncos have been popular. They might hold a better value or very specific niche brands or models, but generally as a whole, less reliable manufacturers tend to depreciate a lot faster. That said, vehicles that are worth buying used are vehicles like EVs. We're seeing them depreciate very aggressively. So buying them new, even with some of the federal incentives on EVs, it just makes more sense to buy them used. Full-size trucks, full-size SUVs, you think Escalades, you think full-size trucks, GMC, Fords, F-150s, they tend to suffer a lot more depreciation. They're closer to that 30 to 40% in the first year to 2 years of depreciation as opposed to, say, a used RAV4. So vehicles that do tend to suffer a lot bigger depreciation, like these trucks, electric vehicles, and just generally even luxury vehicles. You think Range Rovers, BMWs, Audis, unless, again, there's always that caveat, very specialized vehicles. The Porsche 911 is an oddity and certainly one of those that is a bit of an exception to the rule where they command top dollars. But generally most, I would say, luxury brands tend to fall off the cliff in terms of value. Especially when you think about the JLR, Jaguar Land Rover group. After 3 years, the warranty's gone. Everybody knows that it's a $2,000 to $3,000 annual service to keep them on the road. Not to mention the durability of a lot of those makes just is not there. It represents a huge impact to your wallet. So where does it make most sense to buy your brand new vehicle? Well, as we already covered off, you're better off buying a new vehicle when, realistically, you're dealing with one of those preferred brands, one of the reliable brands. You're looking at a Toyota, pardon, of course, with the exception of the Tundras and some of these new V6s. There's been just too much change even for brands like Toyota. But generally, the subcompact cars, the well-known ones, the Civics, the Corollas, those are always good sellers. And because of that, they're commanding dollars. People have confidence in buying one that's 5, 6, even 10 years old, knowing that they're going to last. Even if they need money to go into them for service and repairs, they often aren't going to cost a lot of money. So where it makes more sense is to buy those vehicles brand new. Simply because you're not going to save enough money buying it 2 or 3 years old. The value is there to buy it new. Even if you have to wait a few months. Take the bus, catch a ride, whatever it is. If you want to buy a new car, realistically, the best new cars to buy are vehicles like the CR-Vs and the RAV4s that aren't giving you a big discount because they were driven off the lot. So those are the vehicles where you want to buy them brand new. As well, on top of it, buying brand new offers other incentives. You think about some of the interest rates. Generally, interest rates are a lot lower on brand new brand new vehicles. Of course, some of these manufacturers are going to give you, 1.9, 0.9, 2.9, 3.9%. Even the bank loans, for some new vehicles tend to be a little lower, 4.9, 5.9%. Versus a lot of used vehicles interest rates are going to be up in that 8, 9, 10%. And for subprime buyers, it could be as much, and during the peak, it was as much as 20 to 22%, with the average rounding out about 12 to 14% interest rate. Now, if you think about buying, say, a RAV4, and maybe you're saving by buying one that's a couple of years old, okay, you're thinking, okay, I can save $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000, but you have to take it on a loan. Even the interest rates alone are going to close that gap. Why? Well, because if you're going from something that's maybe a 3% finance rate up to something that's a 12% finance rate, and you borrow that over, say, a 5, 6, or 7 year loan term, that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 gap is quickly made up. And now, lo and behold, by the end of your term, you probably actually saved some money by buying brand new with the lowest interest rates. Not to mention, you haven't given up that service life, that 2, 3, 4 years. That is lost off the back end of that, the lifespan of that vehicle. So there's huge benefits in buying new vehicles. New vehicles offer that warranty protection. Most vehicles now are giving warranty, 3 years bumper to bumper. A lot of them, rust protection, engine drivetrain warranties, and some manufacturers are going up as much as 10 years. But ultimately, it just gives you just that much more warranty protection. You don't have wear and tear. See, because as soon as you buy a used vehicle, even if it's a good quality used vehicle, maybe it's got 40,000 miles on it and it's a late model Honda, you're probably due for tires and brakes in a year or two. Now all of a sudden you've added and incorporated some fast-tracked repairs and maintenance. So you don't have that with brand new. Now again, buying brand new isn't for everybody, and certainly the markups have been a gouge. So also, never buy new if you're facing a brand that has, market adjustment fees, junk fees, add-ons. Scrap all of that. If you're dealing with a popular brand, popular make or model, and some of these manufacturers, OEMs, or even the dealers specifically are trying to launch extra fees on top, that's when you walk away. Okay, but if you're able to get a fair price for a fair vehicle, buying new can represent a great option. So when does it make sense to buy a used vehicle? Well, I've talked about this in previous videos, and I'm a real advocate for buying an older vehicle that you do a little maintenance, but that only has to come in certain conditions, that the price is right. It always comes down to bang for buck and value add. I'm driving an older truck that's almost 25 years old. I've kept it on the road, I've kept it well maintained, I've kept it clean, and it's still running well. See, if you can get a good deal on an older vehicle that's well maintained, that's a great bang for buck. But if you're looking at a truck or a vehicle that generally depreciates very aggressively, you're often better off buying those types of vehicles later on in life, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years of age, and sift through all the junk, because there is a lot of junk out there. But if you can find a quality, low mileage vehicle that's maybe 5 or 7 years old, possibly 10 or even 15 years of age, that's a great place to buy in, because you're probably going to save a ton of money of certain brands. Again, half-ton trucks, three-quarter-ton pickup trucks, large full-size SUVs, electric vehicles. We've seen Tesla depreciate very aggressively. So if you're looking in the market for some of those vehicles on top of luxury vehicles, you're probably going to be better off buying an older vehicle that's maybe 5 to 10 years old with decent mileages that are well maintained. But that said, of course, it also does save you a little bit extra money on insurance, because insurance costs, you don't have to insure an older vehicle as much. When you buy new, that's a drawback buying new. Whereas on the used car vehicle that you just bought, you're able to trim back. You don't need glass coverage. You can trim down on some of the extra frills, benefits. When you're taking out insurance, you can opt out of certain elements or features, especially if you're dealing with something that you don't mind fixing yourself. If it was a little fender bender, you don't mind doing those types of repairs. Insurance companies give breaks for that, generally speaking. So if you want and you're willing to do some of the work yourself, if you're also a cash buyer, that's another great opportunity to buy an older used vehicle. And of course, or if you're able to get a cheap finance rate, which by the way is usually kind of rare on used vehicles, but if for some reason you're able to get that, that's an opportunity to get a deal on the used vehicles. But generally speaking, new vehicles, when you're dealing with reputable car brands, the Toyotas, the Hondas, the Mazdas, compact, subcompact vehicles, they just hold their value too well, including hybrids. And in those cases, if you're considering buying new versus used, the new vehicle is always the way to go. Anyway, as well as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, everybody. Love for you to come back for the next great video, and I hope to see all of you on the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.